Welcome to the Fifth Estate, a conversation between young African scholars from the Foothold School of Government and Professor Mutahi. Today we pose the question whether the next election is a black swan election, more so because it's not a fight between good and evil, but a struggle between two goods. Similarly, this is a confrontation between the prince versus the prince. And if dynasties are vicious and jealous institutions, what should we expect of this fight? Although we think that we know the two candidates, we don't. This is why we ask the following. Can the real Uhuru Kenyatta please stand up? And can the real Raila Odinga please stand up?
Uhuru Kenyatta is the least understood politician in our country. And it is also because he is the least studied president ever. Raila Odinga, on the other hand, is the most studied politician and therefore the most predictable because we understand him very well. If Uhuru Kenyatta tomorrow, for instance, woke up and said, I am going to leave this presidency to William Ruto and let him be the candidate for 2017, that will surprise us, and it is because we do not understand him. But Raila Odinga is a man that is very well understood. And one of the methods that he uses the most, and he has used that this week, is what we call the shock doctrine.
According to Winston Churchill, never waste a disaster. And this is the thinking behind something called the shock doctrine, coined by Naomi Klein. In this shock doctrine, you scare people to death and then demand that your agenda be enacted without delay. The politician squeezes people empty and then fills them with himself. In the shock doctrine, if a crisis does not materialize, you must create one. And the person who administers the political shock is the same person who provides the healing therapy. Raila Odinga is an expert in the politics of the shock doctrine. He creates crises and then benefits politically from it.
When he uses the shock doctrine, it's because he either wants to create a decoy, that is, he has a crisis in his own political backyard, and he wants to remove attention from that particular crisis. Like this week, we knew he had a crisis regarding the unity of his party code, and to remove the attention from that crisis, he moved on to a nondescript project somewhere in Moranga. And voila, in a very short time, he creates a crisis that has dominated news throughout. So he uses shock therapy to either create a decoy through crisis making, or sometimes he uses it in order to move forward. The question we must ask then is, what does Uhuru use as a way of creating a decoy? What does he use in order to move forward? And I want to hypothesize that he uses something we call dog whistling.
Dog whistling is an analogy that borrows from how dogs communicate. When communicating with each other, dogs whistle at a frequency so high that it is only heard by them and humans cannot hear it. In politics, dog whistling is a form of messaging that employs coded language appearing to mean one thing to the general public, but having an additional and more specific meaning to a targeted public.
If shock doctrine is the Raila strategy, then dog whistling is the Uhuru strategy. Shock doctrine is an obvious strategy. That is why we say that we have understood Raila very well. But dog whistling is a strategy of the underground. And I think that Uhuru is using this as a result of having attended the Moi School of Politics, in which he learned that in politics you have to be vague. And the vaguer you are, the better it is for you to be able to achieve your intentions, because then you can go underground and do what you need to do without being bothered. And this is the reason why, after 4 years of his presidency, we still cannot figure this man out. Raila, we understand. Uhuru, we do not understand. So the question is, what techniques must we use to be able to understand a politician?
How to Read a Politician, Some Lessons from the Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. A good politician must not be good. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. In sum, there is virtue in being bad. Between Uhuru and Raila, who is a good politician?
According to the Lucifer principle, by Howard Bloom, good attracts evil, and by extension, evil attracts good. In other words, every virtue has a corresponding vice. Good and evil are both sides of the same coin. True tragedy does not occur when good battles evil. It occurs when one good battles another good.
In politics, the Lucifer principle is about the law of opposites. That is, good attracts bad. And if this particular law is true, then we can hypothesize the following regarding Uhuru Kenyatta. And we are hypothesizing because we do not know him and we are trying to understand him. The one, he uses goodness in order to attract badness to himself. And the more badness he attracts to himself, the more he liberates himself because he feels that he does not owe nobody nothing. The reverse is true for Raila Odinga because he uses badness to attract goodness to himself. And the more goodness he attracts to himself, the more captive he becomes of the love that is shown. So it is better to attract that which is not desirable and not owe anybody nothing than to be captive. That being the logic then that probably Uhuru is using. And if that is the case, we can argue that he is using what we call the mirror imaging effect. But what is this mirror imaging effect in politics?
The concept of mirror imaging is about being one with the enemy in order to unsettle them. A mirror reflects the opposite of what you are. It reflects what we do not even like about ourselves and is therefore the perfect tool for deception. When a man mirrors his enemy by mimicking his movements and doing exactly as he does, he gives the enemy the illusion that they actually share values. The mirror imaging strategy can be physical, moral, or emotional. When you physically mimic an enemy, you annoy them. When you emotionally mirror their desire, you confuse them. And when you morally mirror them, you reveal their soft bellies. Between Raila and Uhuru, who is engaging in mirror imaging? Who is using subtle deception to derail the other?
Call it mirror imaging, call it dog whistling. We are yet to understand this man, Uhuru Kenyatta. And maybe it is because political dynasties have a way they breed their own. Although Raila is also bred by a dynasty, we can hypothesize that because of his mystique, Uhuru is probably more thoroughbred than Raila. But to take him on in what Niccolo Machiavelli would call the battle between the prince and the prince, Raila is advised to go on sabbatical in order to do a thoroughgoing anatomy of this man, Uhuru Kenyatta. But in the meantime, and because Raila remains casual, we hypothesize that Uhuru will beat him in the coming election.